Here we are. We're live.
We're live. It's great.
I know. This is great. So I have the pleasure this morning. It's morning for me here. I'm in Pacific Time, US, to have this conversation with Steve Rayson. Steve, it's good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you, Andy. Yeah, I'm over in the UK, so 5 in the evening here, but it's a nice sunny day. Not as hot as you are in Vegas, I'm sure, but it's a lovely sunny day.
It's very sunny here. I'm in Las Vegas for a conference, and one of the things I love about these Semrush collaborations is that it's a global audience. There's people from all over the world who are going to be joining us today.
Yeah. Yeah, and I always like the fact you get people logging from Argentina and Canada and New Zealand.
Yeah.
It's great, really. So, really nice to get different perspectives. So it's great.
Yeah. And this is a universal topic today. I can't think of a brand that won't get something out of this. I mean, collaboration, collaborative content, influencer marketing. This one's pretty universal, right?
Yeah, I hope so. I hope we can share some good ideas and things, and at least share what worked for us, and hopefully spark some ideas for other people. Just what works for you doesn't always work for somebody else, but at least you can take away, ideas around it. So hopefully we'll spark a few ideas.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, the idea of collaboration is almost universal because it's a time saver. It makes you more efficient and effective in your marketing. It can impact both quality and the time commitment to create stuff. And speaking to you specifically, it's fun because we're going to multiply influencer marketing collaboration by this other amazing tactic of research. This should be awesome.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. So thanks everyone who's joined us so far. We're going to just hang out here for a few minutes and give some more people a chance to jump in. We've synchronized watches, and I'm seeing it's just after the hour. So we're just going to have this conversation here.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to jump into some really practical stuff. I'm going to start with a few slides, like a very short presentation with some specific takeaways for anyone, so that you'll get value right away. And then the big case study, the deep dive with Steve on what's worked for him, not just at Buzzsumo, but we might go to some of Steve's past lives here. For those who didn't know, Steve is a serial entrepreneur.
Yeah, I've done a few companies in the past. My immediate ones prior to Buzzsumo were e-learning companies, where we focused a lot on content because we were building really interactive content, on-screen experiences. And when you're building learning content, it's really hard to keep the learners engaged. So our focus all the time was, how do we keep the learners engaged with this content? How do we keep them to get to the end of the learning? And it is really hard. So so all my experience for the sort of 5 or 6 years before this was about screen-based experiences and building e-learning companies. So yeah, very happy. If anyone wants to talk about e-learning, happy to talk about that as well.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be interesting for people because a lot of people maybe don't know about what you were doing prior to Buzzsumo. And what you just mentioned is important too. The tactic we're discussing today, which is the collaborative content approach to influencer marketing, is also important for engagement, right? Because if your content mix is just one blog post after another, and for a lot of people, they think that that's content marketing, is just blogging. There's a lot more to content marketing than just blogging. So we're going to the specifics about that.
Yeah, and I think influencer marketing works at different levels as well. I mean, we were a startup people think Buzzsumo's been around a long time. We did have a beta around in 2013, but we actually didn't legally form the company until March 2014. So still relatively new, and we never paid an influencer for anything. So everything we did, we worked with influencers, wasn't a payment. I mean, we now sponsor one podcast. But I think it can work at lots of levels, really. You don't have to go and buy big influencers. Ours was building relationships with influencers, on literally zero budget, because we have very little budget. So.
And yet another important point about this tactic, like the best content marketing tactics, this is not an out-of-pocket spend. We're going to be going into ways to find and collaborate with people who are thrilled to collaborate with anybody, right? Not just the famous celebrities, but micro-influencers, and how it can improve engagement, it can improve content, it can improve reach, and do all these things without this is the organic, it's interesting to me the way I think about these things. It's like every channel has the paid and the organic piece. There's social organic reach and social paid. There's search, PPC, and there's search organic. Influencer marketing maybe is the same. There's a big paid, category in influencer marketing where Instagram celebrities are cashing checks to put a product in a picture. But what we're talking about today is the organic, the the content piece that goes with influencer marketing, which I've never spent any money on either, but I use all the time.
Yeah. No, it's an incredibly effective way. So yeah, be good to talk it through, because I'm sure I'll learn lots from you as well. I always learn something every time we meet, so it's I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I think I'm the one who's going to learn the most on this one, but
we'll see.
we've done, you and I have done this a lot, and I've been thinking about it a lot, and I've written about this and taught it a lot, and I'm going to put it in that narrow category of maybe like the top 3 things like that I know. Like if you distill everything that I know about content, 18 years of search and 10 years of content marketing, I'm going to put this in literally one of the main 3 things where if I only had a few minutes to share insights with anyone on this topic, I would include this: collaborative content marketing. So that said, I think we can jump right in with a couple of slides. I'm going to show a mini version of this, of how this might work for a marketer in this category. This is going to be a very short deck. I think I've got only a handful of things here, and this is just to make sure, just to set the tone. We want this to be interactive. I'm going to show slides here, but then we're going to have a conversation here with Steve, and I'd like to invite anyone to submit questions themselves. So hopefully this is a bit thought-provoking, trigger some questions, trigger some ideas. You'd like us to go deeper into anything, just submit a question. We're listening, we're interacting. This is not a one-way channel. We're digital, it should be dialogue-based, right? So here we go. Let me share a screen. Very good. And share, screen sharing. How does that look, Steve? Can you see my...
that looks good. It's all up on the screen. Looks good.
Good. Okay. So for those of you, I got in the bottom right there, there's a hashtag if you'd like to use it, Semrush Live. But very briefly, I've even distilled this down yet this morning. You'll see even a tighter version than you saw last time, Steve. I've got just 3. Here's my 3. There's more, of course. But here are my top 3 ways to collaborate with content and influencers. Number 1. As you are creating a piece, don't just do it. Don't just go it alone. It's not a solo exercise. Reach out to someone who is relevant on that topic and ask them for a contributor quote. Journalists would never publish an article without including a source. Why would the content marketer or blogger publish a blog post without including a contributor? So asking for that contributor quote is one of the main ways, an easy way, a fast way to get better results in several ways I'll explain. The expert interview roundup. The expert roundup. I'm going to ask Steve, this is kind of an op-ed piece here. I'm interested in, I'd like to hear from all of you whether you think that this one has been overdone. And of course, overdone is relevant to the category. In marketing, maybe we say yes. In other niches, maybe not. Finally, the deep dive. And this is where Steve's going to share some of his expertise and experience. The interview, the research collaboration, when you go farther with into a bigger relationship with an influencer or an influential brand. Here's how I do the contributor quote. I'm writing an article, for example, on conversion optimization. I know Jen Havis is an expert at conversion optimization. I've always wanted to meet her. Why not include her in something? So I simply reach out and say, Jen, would you like to contribute to this piece? Jen, even though I don't know her well, right, maybe interacted a little bit on social media, says, yes, sure, happy to contribute, and sends me a short quote. The quote was amazing, and I am thrilled to include it. So I let her know, thank you, and I'm ready, and I will inform her when the piece goes live. Here's the article. Oh, this article was not about, this was about testimonials. I asked her for some insights about testimonials. Scrolling down here, you can see there is the quote from Jen in the middle of the page, which is amazing. I learned something immediately. This is an immediate benefit, and I'll make this point now. If you include others in your content, there's a good probability that you'll learn just by reading your own blog. That's right, you can learn by reading your own blog, which is not common if you don't include content, if you're not collaborating on content. And her insight is brilliant, and I'll share it with you now. She just says, don't just put a testimonial into your sales pages, your program pages, your services, your products, but put a headline above the testimonial, which has changed how I think about testimonials, changes how we approached websites. We're a web design company. And now whenever we make testimonials, we include like the 5 juiciest, most effective, most powerful words from that testimonial as a mini headline. This became my framework for testimonials, which you can steal. Grab a screenshot of this. It is one of steal it. I mean, Jen learned this from experts as well. It's the reason why Amazon makes you write a headline for your reviews. It's to increase the visual prominence on the most compelling piece of the evidence. So if you want to stop the scan reader or slow down the scroll for someone, include a headline, increases the visual prominence. It makes that thing more likely to be read. The power of subheads. It's universal in marketing. And side note, I recommend against making a testimonials page. Testimonials pages are rarely visited. Go look at your analytics. If you have a testimonials page, it's like probably not a popular page. Putting in powerful content on unpopular pages is the opposite of good digital marketing. Get rid of your testimonials page. Make every page a testimonials page. Put them throughout the site. Put your best testimonials on your most popular pages. Of course, combining cheese and mousetraps. This is how digital works. So the idea is that everything that you say is marketing, but everything they say can be social proof. These are things that I learned through collaborative content with Jen Haviz on that article. Another benefit is that Jen is now invested in my piece. Blogger A on the left goes it alone, right? They're just doing it solo. Blogger B on the right is socializing the topic, including people in the article, putting in the contributor quotes. These two pieces go live. Who do you think gets greater social shares? Who do you think gets a greater audience? You are stacking the deck. It's called ego bait. When you put people into something, they're very likely to feel invested and to share it. So everybody knows, especially in the Semrush community, everybody knows that content optimized for search includes keywords. Put your target phrase in your title, your header, your body text. But not everyone seems to know that content optimized for social media includes people. If there aren't faces and names in your content, you really didn't optimize that content for maximum reach in social media. We'll talk about how to find people and who to connect with in a second. Bottom line, there better be more than 0 people waiting for your article to go live. Here's a good example. I'm at a conference now. I like to go to conferences. Steve and I meet at conferences. We'll talk about conferences and networking tactic. So I read this article about how to get more value from a conference. And when it goes live, right, this piece has all kinds of others in it. I'll show you by scrolling through. There's a screencast of me scrolling through this. Look, Nick, Shayla, Heidi, Emily, Steve, you might recognize some of these people. There's Sujan Patel, there's Steve Garfield, there's Kara Gorgone, there's Barry Feldman, there's Kathy McPhillips. Look at all the people in this article. Jason Quay, and there's Mac and Ian and all of Sonia and Amanda and all these people, right? So this thing goes live. What happens? It's a party. They're sharing it. They're all over the place. I don't even have to share it. They're all sharing it. They're all talking about it. They're all commenting on it. According to Steve's tool, Buzzsumo, calculates older screenshot here. You can tell from some of the data sources, but 1,000+ people shared that article. Would that have happened if I did not have a collaborative approach to content marketing? Definitely not. Look at the evidence. You get the idea. So an ally in creating content is an ally in promoting content. Build a mini army behind your content by including them in it. Check out your fun report in Google Analytics afterwards. You'll see that the fun will spike right during these collaborations. That's a joke slide. Steve, you knew it when you saw it. Right? No one believes that. That's fun. Your friendship line is going up and to the right when you check your friendship reports. Also a joke slide. High fives, just as good as conversions. That you get the idea. So bottom line, if you're not making friends, you're doing it wrong. I think this is what digital is about. It's about friendship. It's about friendship. So I'm proud to call you a friend, Steve and Anton, and so many people at Semrush, and hugs when you see them, right? That's good. We could call it influencer marketing. I'm going to call it friendship marketing, or just friendship in general. So coming back, I hope that kind of sets the tone here a little bit. My screen sharing is off, and and I'd like to start just a conversation with you, Steve. Just first, did that resonate? Anything there that you connected with especially or felt strongly about?
Yeah, no, lots there that resonate. And I think particularly for me is about never publish alone. We have a phrase, never publish alone. And you say when you publish a piece of content, you need other people waiting to help share it and promote it. I'm always still scared when I do our own stats. As you know, we're saying the median number of shares a post gets is 4. It's really very low. And so you've got to help promote your content, and influencers are key to helping that reach, etc. So I think never publish alone is a good phrase to use. So that really resonates with me, that you've got to be lining up people and getting them engaged with your content. And you can do that in lots of ways, as you say. You can mention them in your content. You can ask for a contributor quote. I do think some of the expert roundups are being a bit overdone, but that may be me.
No, I think you get into that.
Yeah, I'm definitely not an influencer, but I get asked a lot about will you contribute, etc. Initially, it was fun, and now I've got lots and lots and lots. And I think as you say, maybe in some niches it's okay, but in the marketing space, I think it's been done a lot. So I think you have to find other ways. I mean, I like to involve people before I write the content as well, in terms of, when I did the headlines piece with you, I mean, I was doing the research on headlines, thought this is really interesting, but I genuinely would like other people's views on it, because what does it mean? What's the take on it? And I think it's really hard as an individual to understand the world. Just this is a general point on life, is that the more you talk with other people, the more you socialize, the more you understand and get different perspectives. So when I'm doing research, it's hard to always get all the answers yourself or to understand it. So, on that piece, I talked to you and said, what do you think's happening here? And about headlines, and I did the same with Anne Handley and a few others. And so I then included your content inside the post, but it was really more than an expert view. It was helping to understand the trends. And so people were involved, knew I was going to write the post long before it was published, really, because I was involving them in the research. So I think that's another way that you can involve people. You don't just have to say, can you give me a quote? It can be, I've done this research, I'm finding this trend. What do you think about it? So that's what's happening with you. But that's before you can approach them. I would sort of go back to the beginning. I would say this in terms of, I think mapping your landscape. I mean, to me, the most important thing about influencer marketing is understanding your audience, because you're trying to reach an audience, etc. So before you can work out who the influencers are, you need to know who your audience is, and then you can work backwards. I think in terms of, who do they respect, who do they like, what blogs do they read, what podcasts do they listen to, and once you understand all those things about your audience, I don't think it's so difficult then to start thinking about, okay, well, these are influencers I can reach out to. So to me, I don't know what it's like to you, but I think it's often going back to, what's my audience? Who do they respect, really? It's otherwise I think you can reach out to the wrong people. It would be fantastic to have Beyonce say Buzzsumo is a fantastic tool, but I don't think her audience is that interested in content marketing, so it's not going to be that helpful to me. So it's understanding your audience, I think, is a starting point.
I think so too. It should be, right? Because if you do even a little bit of thinking about audience research or personas, and you conclude, my audience spends time in these places, they read these things, they listen to these people. They don't have to be celebrities, right? In fact, a celebrity might be ineffective, right? So I'd like to introduce, if people haven't thought about it yet, this concept of the micro-influencer, because the narrower the niche, especially, right? If you go down into a niche, you're going to find people that are highly influential over your audience, potentially, that may have relatively small followings, or maybe just they have the very loyal, they have high engagement, they have the very loyal blog readers, they have a very concentrated list. I think I'm really interested in the distinction between search and social as visitors' intent and sources of traffic, and what's the difference. Tell me if you'd agree with this statement. If your goals are search, the ideal collaborator is someone who writes for a high domain authority blog, high domain score blog, or someone who is just a deep expert in the topic, improving the quality. But if your goal is social, maybe someone who just does have a large social following might help you meet your goals.
I'd be unsure about it. I mean, I would agree with the general split. I mean, I think an influencer, it's not necessarily someone with lots of followers. I think we've got to try and get away from that. And of course, there are some, but they tend to be in high demand. To me, it's about, do they have an engaged audience that matters to you, really? And because some people have hundreds of thousands of followers, but actually very little engagement. I mean, some of the big ones, you can see them, they have 500,000 followers. On average, they might get 10 retweets every time they tweet. Well, that's useful, but it's quite small. I think they need an engaged audience, really, that matters to you. So even someone with a lot of followers, they've still got to have an audience that's relevant to you. But I would agree with you absolutely that, to me, what's an influence? What are you using an influencer for? And there are lots of things like reach, etc. But I think about it in the context of amplifying my content. How are they going to amplify the content? And content gets amplified in only a limited number of ways. People share it, people recommend it, people link to it. Links are so important when it comes to SEO. And if you saw the trends report I did earlier in the year, the number of referrals from social has been going down, from Google going up.
Right.
Parsley, who track, I think, 3,000 or 4,000 publishers, twice as many referrals to those sites now from Google as from social. So you need SEO. And I know we don't know what's exactly in the Google algorithm, but I know that links are important. So you've got to get links to your content. So I think you're right. If you can build a relationship with a high authority author or an author with a high authority blog, and they can put a link to your content, getting links is really tough, really tough. There are certain types of content that works really well, but as a general rule, it's really tough. So if you can build relationships with those people who are going to link to your content, that's incredibly powerful. It's worth a lot of shares.
Well, this is a topic for a webinar tomorrow, where I'm again back on Semrush, and we're talking about the 90-day challenge. So anyone who's here that's interested in this link building tactic, if there's a way, we're going to explore ways to accelerate that. It's one of the best questions in marketing. And Steve, you put your finger right on it. If we were trying to work backwards from why links happen, why do people link to things? Why do you link to things, or me, or anybody? Why do people? It's basically two things, I think, as I try to reverse engineer the answer to one of the most important questions in digital, how to grow authority and how to build links. You need two things. One, you have to have something worth linking to, and research. You and I both know, and from your research, actually informed me on this. It's like be the primary source, publish original research. It's overwhelmingly powerful as a source, as the ability to attract links. But the second thing is it has to be visible to people who create links.
Yeah.
You have to have something worth linking to, and it has to be visible to people who create links. So if you try to answer the question, how do I get influencers to know about my link-worthy content? You answered that question through collaboration. How do you get Ann Handley to know about your article? You put her in it. You invite her. She's a contributor. So you answered you solved half the problem of growing links by collaborating with influencers and content creators on the piece itself.
Yeah, I think you're right also about the types of content. We know a lot about the types of content that get links. Why does somebody link to you? And it's normally because it's authoritative in some way. So you need to build an authoritative blog and an authoritative site, really, or you need to be an authority, or you need to be working with influencers who are authorities. It needs to be authoritative, but typically it's, we know what is posts get lots of links, so the Wikipedia pages, the what is Bitcoin pages, but you also have to be one of the most comprehensive and authoritative answers, because there'll be lots of posts on what is Bitcoin. So, but statistics, people link to statistics a lot, things like that. So, statistical posts get a lot of links, whereas the 7 ways to improve your landing page doesn't get so many links, for example. So we know the types of content, so we can focus on that type of content, but it does have to be authoritative, comprehensive, I think. And I know Lee Alden says this, but you need to be the best answer. If you're writing a post on what is content marketing, I think you can forget it, because the Content Marketing Institute one is so strong at the top of Google. Right. You're not going to dislodge that one, but you could then pick a sub niche or something. So I think, answer a question, but be the best answer on that question. If you can't be the best answer, find a question where you can be the best answer. Don't, beat yourself up trying to beat Content Marketing Institute for that one. It's not going to work, I don't think.
And people link to, who told me this? Might have been Brian Dean. I sometimes do like random calls with different marketers. People link to sound bites.
Yeah.
People link to statistics. People link to something that supports the claim that they're making, or the piece that they're working on. So when you answer a question, if it's a question that is important in that field, you may find that you become the first slide in a bunch of people's presentations, or a link in the first paragraph. Like one piece of research we did that we're known for now is like blogging is hard.
Yeah.
How hard? Answer a question that supports a bunch of other content. Greg Michio, hey Greg, good friend of mine, is on here, and he asked a good question. How do you get links, not just quotes? How do you take this from just collaborating with an influencer to actually triggering the action that might make this influencer link back to you? First, of course, if it's an influence, if it's a piece like Steve said that answers questions or supplies data, very helpful. But this is going to sound crazy. If you do this well and truly become friends with, like I'm friends with Greg, someone who creates content, you can get links by simply asking for them. I have friends who sometimes say, Andy, I'm launching this thing, I'm promoting this thing. Would you mind linking to, I'm starting from zero here. Is there anything you're working on that you could refer back to, a reference or cite or a link to this piece I'm doing? I will take time out of my day to look for places to link to them because we are friends.
Yeah, no, if you build friends and relationships, people want to help you. I think that's the thing, is that most people in this industry, we were very lucky working in this industry. I think most people are really nice in our industry, and loads of nice people will give you their time, will help you, etc. It's not true of all industries, but I think in our industry, people are incredibly helpful. And if you build relationships, and as you say, it's about building friendships. I think there are lots of people you can work with, but find the ones you connect with. There'll always be people you connect with. Like, I feel like connect with you more about, I know it's more data driven. Andy likes similar stuff to I like. It's a slightly different approach. Find the people that connect with you, I think, and then you build that relationship, and it becomes a friendship over time. But people are keen to help you, I think, and to reciprocate. So that is a way of getting links. The other form of content I think gets links from my research is controversial content. So you have to be careful with controversial content. But I know when Mark Schaefer wrote something about content shock and that content marketing is not sustainable and etc., loads of people, because it was an interesting debate, lots of people linked to the article. So when people talk about content shock, they still link to Mark's article. So that got a lot of links. I mean, the other famous one, I think, was the one when Michael Moore at last 2 summers ago said, Donald Trump is going to win. This is why. And that was controversial at the time. And so it got lots of people linking to it, to disagree with it or agree with it. So I think even controversial content can work well. We did an analysis of newspaper content, and we looked at the opinion content and then the other content, and the opinion content got far more links than the general news content. I mean, far more links. And that was sort of interesting. And I think it's because opinion content is, you want to support it, not support it, etc. So logically, people link to things which is sort of referenceable, I think, as well. So go back to statistics research, people link to those sorts of things, and influencers are keen to do that, really. So there are lots of ways I think you can help get links, but links are just one element of the influencer marketing, I think.
Yeah, it occurs to me that's almost like the really powerful stuff on either the left brain or the right brain. The stuff that triggers really strong emotion, or the stuff that just provides really dry but valuable data. It's sort of like, I find it hard to consistently produce opinion-forming journalism, you called it in one of your research pieces. But collaboration might help, right? One, if you're working with an influencer, or you're trying to make a piece that will elicit emotion, I think one of the triggers can be to try to sort of touch the third rail, as they say, to talk about the thing that no one else is talking about. What are people in your industry, what question in your industry are people afraid to answer? There's I saw a piece recently from Jason Quay. It was like the pricing question sometimes, or the thing that you think is true but most people would disagree with, or like Michael Moore, the thing that you think will happen that most people don't think will happen. So the outreach. So you mentioned, I want to touch on this, the friendship piece, which is the ultimate goal in life and marketing and search. One of the things that you and I both believe in is the offline component to that, which I think is something you don't see in the tips about influencer marketing. What do you think about offline networking?
Yeah, I personally think it's essential. Not essential, but fairly close to essential. I mean, I think there's a lot of things. I think once you've mapped your landscape and you know the influence the podcast your audience listen to, I think there is a question about how you outreach to them, which somebody just asked. I think Sarah's just asked in the chat room. And I think there are lots of ways to do that. I think you can mention them in your content. You can recommend their services. You can see when they're commenting on blogs. You can share content they publish. There are lots of things that you can do to support them. And I think the starting point really is, how can I support them? I think that's where you should start with an influencer, not how can they support me? How can I support them? And when you think about it, there are lots of ways you can support them. You can recommend their services. You can introduce them to people. You might have data they're interested in. You might have case studies they're interested in. Even big influencers are keen to know what's working in your company. What isn't? What does your company find hard? What does it find easy? What are the trends? Do you have a good case study? There are lots of things you could share that they're interested in, which is helpful to them, I think. But so I try to do all of those things, and it takes time to build a relationship with an influencer, just as it takes time to build a friendship. But for me, once I've sort of worked out people I feel I sort of connect with a bit, I want to meet them in person. So I go to conferences as much as anything to meet them. So, I think I did it with you at a conference where, wait till you finish talking at the end of the session. Then I walk up and I'm one of those people in the queue afterwards just to say hello and say, I like what you're doing, etc. Can we do something together? So I think the human element really matters, because once you've had the cup of coffee or a drink or whatever it happens to be, it's a slightly different relationship. It can then go back online. But I think the human element's really important. And you can use conferences as a way of doing that, getting to meet they're very efficient in getting to meet quite a lot of people quite quickly sometimes. And I go to social media marketing, and there are some great speakers there, but mainly I go to meet the people. I go because lots of people go to that event, and so I go to meet people. So I think that's important. I think there are lots of other ways you can then reach out to them, but I think the human element to me is just still remains really quite an important component. So, then you can take the relationship further and do some collaboration on content, etc. But I do like to meet people in person personally.
I think it's hard because we have a global audience here in Semrush, and that there are people who don't have that opportunity to get on a plane and connect with the influencers over their audience sometimes, and that can be difficult. I think that you can make strong friendships online, but you want to max out the quality of the connection to at least Google Hangouts, Skype, Zoom, whatever your tool is.
I think so. I think as I said, there are lots of ways you can reach out. You can ask for a contribution, etc. You can ask them to be interviewed for a podcast or something. I find I've done hundreds probably of podcasts, I'm sure, as you have, and I find I get to know people just that because you're chatting. It's a one-to-one sentiment. So people often say, Steve, will you contribute to a podcast or be an interview? I'm quite happy to listen and talk for as long as I can. It's quite easy for me to do. So I do quite a lot of podcasts. I've got a couple doing tomorrow. And so you get to know the person just through chatting, and then you just follow that up and chat to people. So I think you can do it in other ways as well. So it doesn't have to be face-to-face, although I think it's ideal if you can do it face-to-face. But otherwise, I think human interaction like this type of webinar or a podcast or something where you can talk to them, you just get a different sense, I think.
Well, here's a couple of tips for influencer marketing, networking, collaboration, friendship. If possible, go to events. If possible, create an event. We have a monthly event that we created years ago that people love, or I have a monthly happy hour. People who want to hang out, I just invite them I go to the same bar once a month. If you're in Chicago, by the way, please reach out to me. I'll tell you where and when. To Steve's point, though, for our listeners and viewers, the next closest thing would be to something I've done a lot. I mentioned I talked to Brian Dean. Why did I talk to Brian Dean? I simply asked him if he would be willing to do a 30-minute conversation with me over social media, right? I'm like, hey, can we jump on a call? I love what you're doing. I want to learn from you. I have an idea we can share. So about once a week, I reach out to a random blogger and do a 30-minute video conversation with them still to this day. Another tactic, form a mastermind group. I want to be better at Google Analytics. How can I do that? I reached out to 4 or 5 of the best people who are smarter than me and asked them if they'd be willing to do a monthly call with each other. Forming these little mastermind groups actually can be very effective, cost nothing. So the podcast interviews are great. Just outreach, just conversation, just forming little groups, online or offline. Create a Slack channel. Invite 20. Basically, make a list of the people that you really, really want to get to know better. If it's a few of them, form a mastermind group. If it's a dozen or more, form a Slack group. If it's a lot, you can create a little, look to start mini communities if possible.
Yeah, and I think the thing about not thinking then about the really big influencers, because it can be hard to get them into an expert group, but you can get some other peers of yours involved as well. So it doesn't have to be the really big influencers to get them involved in those sorts of groups, I think. So yeah, don't think just of the big influencers, but just of a smaller group, because they still have reach. And those micro influencers are really important in just, getting your name out there, gradually building your network of people, really. So yeah, think about who they are, but it doesn't have to be the really big influencers. But I would also start, sorry, Andy, with that point about help them. How do you help them? Because people say, well, it's okay for you, Steve or Andy, that someone might join your group on analytics because you're known for analytics. But for me, when we started, I wasn't known in social media. I'd worked in e-learning before and built e-learning companies. So I had to sort of make friends with people. So I just tried to just offer as much as I can. In our case, we had data, but you might have case studies, you might have stories. And so I just offered data to loads of people. And that's really what really got us going, I think, was the one we did with Moz, with Rand Fishkin. I didn't really know Rand. I'd met him a few times online. But what was nice is you often have more friends than you think you have. Rand put out a nice tweet saying, I really like Buzzsumo. So rather than just let that go, I sort of followed up and said, well, we're doing some research. Would you like to do some joint research, etc.? And we were just chatting, and he was saying, well, I'd really like to know more about the correlation between shares and links. Is there a correlation between the two? So I said, look, we'll do the research. So it became a joint research project. in reality, I think Rand would admit, it's a great guy, but we did most of the research. But in reality, they had a huge audience. I mean, so it was lucky because they had a huge audience. But we did all that research, and it was quite nice. It positioned us. Research also positions you a bit as an authority. You know what you're talking about. So that worked as a joint project. So that was content collaboration around a piece of research, even though we did quite a lot of it. But it could be that way with other people. Maybe you have case studies or data or whatever it happens to be that you can share with an influencer, which is useful to them. And that was good for Rand. It was good for us. It was the post ultimately in the report went on the Moz site. It's still one of the most linked. It's not as big as their SEO guide, etc. But I think it got about 6,000 links, which is a lot of links to get for a single article. So it's a big piece, really. So it was beneficial to their blog. But it was also beneficial to us in terms of awareness. So it's about win-win, really. It's got to be something in it on both sides, I think. And so it's not thinking about what can they do for you, but almost I think if you start the other way around, it's a lot easier then. Think, how do I help them? What are they trying to do? How can I support them with their goals? I do think that's where we need to start.
Yeah, I'm going to recommend against the cold email, which is so overdone and just seems it's like such a long shot. I'm not sure what tools people are using to send these, but that cold email of, hey, will you link to my article?
Yeah. Well, that must hardly ever work, I think. I think there's a context in which you can do that. I mean, at Buzzsumo, we have a little tool which we can tell when people mention you but don't link to you. So we have an alert system in Buzzsumo. So when people mention Buzzsumo but don't link to us, we look at the domain authority, and ones with the domain authority above 50 on Moz ranking, we will then write to those people and say, fantastic that you mentioned us, would you mind linking? I think that can work, but linking is hard. And if people don't know you, just saying, will you link to my article? No, probably not really. You have to build a relationship before you ask for something, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. Delete. Those emails.
What's in it for the influencer when they do that, really? And I think that's where I'd start by thinking about what can you do for them. So it could be, I saw that you're interested in this. We've got some interesting data. Would you be interested in it? Talk to this person or a case study, etc. There are ways in which we can do it. Or, we're going to run an event and can we promote your book on that event, etc. There are lots of ways you can do it to be helpful to them. So I think just start with how can you help them, and then think about things you can do together. But collaboration can take so many forms. So that's research, I think, is great, but it can be a webinar like we're doing today. I mean, when we started, we ran a series, we call them expert webinars, and we did approach people because we did research around each one, and we got people to run webinars with us. So, Larry, Kim, Lee Odin, etc. And they work great because, again, there's that joint reach. Both sides promote it. It also, I think, you're known by the company you keep as well. So it's like if you do webinars with good authoritative people, you get sort of get reputation, which I think is aligned with that reputation. So you're known by the company you keep, I think. So I think the webinars work well. I think podcasts can work well. You can interview people for podcasts. There are so many ways you can do joint collaborations with people. It doesn't have to be necessarily just blog content. To say, I think webinars well, in webinars you can then share. If you do slides, you can share the slides afterwards, or you can share a write-up, for example. So I think there are so many ways that you can do joint collaboration, and collaboration is so much more powerful than will you link to my post.
I think that's a way to
work. I think the other thing I'd say is that it's important to have people who are almost your advocates. It's a mention by a big influencer like Rand is great, but what's better is when they're on stage, they're advocating for you as well. So I think part of your challenge, I think, is to build a strong friendship so that people actually advocate for you. So I'm thinking about this, use this tool, or talk to Steve about content research, or talk to Andy about your Google Analytics strategy, whatever it happens to be. Is people who you get to know you well and want to reciprocate and help you, but they then advocate for you. And that's so much more powerful. Just trying to get a mention or even just a link, that's not the same as somebody who genuinely believes in what you're doing and advocates for you. And I think it's obviously a high level aim, but that's your aim, I think, not to get a mention from an influencer, but to really get them to work with you. And someone's just saying,
that's the question. Yep. So Marcella, this is a valid point. We got this question. This works when you already have a name and an audience. What about when you're smaller or just starting out? So I'm going to agree with everything Steve just said, and emphasize the fact that if the fame ratio, if the person is just has a much bigger personal brand than you or your brand, that means you have to go slower, and maybe don't aim too high at first anyway. Nobody knew me when I started reaching out to write guest posts for all these different blogs. I set a goal 1 year to be a guest blogger on all these different platforms, and I worked very hard to build relationships with editors to be able to submit and get my content accepted. People that had no idea who I was, right? This is, at the time, I had zero name at all. So it was a slow process of networking where you're going to give before you expect to get. So this is true in everything, by the way. If you want LinkedIn recommendations, you should be giving people LinkedIn recommendations. If you want to be endorsed, give people endorsements. If you want to be quoted, we should be quoting people. You know, so, but there are certain shortcuts a little bit, like every author wants Amazon reviews. Every podcaster wants iTunes reviews. There are ways where you can trigger, this is a cognitive bias. Reciprocity is a cognitive bias. So if you want to make someone very grateful to you, which increases the chance that they'll say yes when you ask for a mini favor, like, can I quote you? You can accelerate that process by giving them things that they will be very grateful for. Linking to them, mentioning them, reviewing them. These are things that will help accelerate, or even, and very powerful, the thoughtful comment on their content.
Thoughtful comment, engaging them in conversation, I think, promoting them. It is hard when you start out, it is, but I mean, I really came into this social media market space in 2014, so it's still relatively new. The thing that I did, which was interesting, is I wrote a review of I forget which tool, I think it might have been Sprout Social or something. I wrote a long review, comprehensive review of the tool, and I sent it to Social Media Today, which is one of the big sites. I thought people read this site. It's not as big now as Social Media Examiner is, but I wrote to them and said, look, I really like tools and I'm a bit geeky. I get into them, here's a review. Would you mind, would you be interested in running reviews? And they said, yeah. And then I said, well, I could do reviews of tools, and they need good writers, etc. So actually, the way I got into this space in 2014, if you go back on Social Media Today, is every week they let me write a review of a tool. And that was really quite good. So for about 6 months, I did nothing. Every week I reviewed a tool and wrote it, which gave me a good insight into the market, which is what I was trying to get, understand how Buzzsumo would fit into that. But people knew me for my tools and things as well. And, as well, lots of people then approached me. So, that was a bit easier. So, but I was doing a lot of work, unpaid, of course, a lot of work, a day or two a week to do those reviews, to get inside the tool, to write a good review, etc. I got nothing back from it, but they got good content out of it. So they got good content for nothing from a writer. So there are lots of different ways that you can do it. That was just the way that I did it when I was first getting into this space, because I wanted to get known for people who understood a bit about the tools. So there are different ways you can do it, I think.
Yeah, you're solving, you're using empathy. You're solving a problem for them. They have an audience, they need content. That's actually what influencer marketing really is. One side provides the value in content, the other side provides the value in the audience. It's any example of influencer marketing is a combination of quality content with exposure, and when these two meet, everyone gets value.
I think that's exactly right. Everyone gets value when you do that. And I would think about who are influencers as well, because there are the big people with lots of followers, but there are the other people who are your peers in the space, but people respect and know them. There are some experts in your space. There may be analysts in your space. I would say, there are obviously bloggers, but don't forget journalists. And I talked about it before and say, I quite like spotting journalist interns. I try to build relationships with junior journalists because I know what they need. They need stories, they need information, etc. So they need data and stuff. So I have built a relationship with a whole series of journalist interns who are now gradually moving up the ranks in the various newspapers, because they can sometimes get me a link, which is fantastic. But what I'm giving them is research and data, saying, look, if you're working on a story about X and you need data about this, use it. And we built a great relationship with BuzzFeed, where they're doing the fake news, and we're saying, look, we can give you all the data on how many shares. So we couldn't tell you what's a fake news article, they did, but we can then provide you with all the data about how well that got shared, etc., and traction. So they used us as a reference source. If you go to the BuzzFeed fake news articles, they say data from Buzzsumo, and there's a link to us, a link from BuzzFeed. Fantastic. So we're providing data for nothing. So think about what they need. In the case of junior journalists, they want stories, they want data, etc. So you can find ways of helping those people. You don't need to go to the senior journalists, because you won't get through the inbox. But actually a junior or intern, or someone who's making their career, you can start to build relationships with those people. I built a relationship with a person on the New York Times, and he was really interested in the work on headlines. Said, "We're doing this work on headlines. Are you interested?" and etc. And once I shared it, he shared it. But because his audience was interested in journalism and headlines, his tweet got retweeted 600 times. One tweet. He had an audience. His audience was interested in the topic, and so it wasn't just that he was a journalist on the New York Times, but his audience was very, very interested in how headlines work. So you've got to think about the influencer's audience and what are they interested in. As I say, getting Beyonce to tweet that would not have got as many retweets. Really, it's you've got to find people with the right audience, really. But there are always people out there you can build relationships with, and you have far more friends than you think you have, because there will be people who've liked your content in the past, who've shared your content, or who are customers, etc., who you've talked to at conferences. So think about all those people. You can start to build a relationship with those people, and then gradually build your way up. But you do have lots of friends out there, really. I think you have a look at who other people I've shared it or shared a similar article, shared similar views, etc., and then start to build those relationships.
I've got here's an example in a short story about how I use some of these tactics once. I'm at an event, so I'm meeting people live, so I get the big shortcut of having the chance to talk to someone face to face without having built a relationship solely on social media. The moderator of one of the panels of the event was an editor for the New York Times. After the panel's over, most people are in line to talk to the panelists. I went straight to the editor of the New York Times. And I said, you're doing an amazing job here. I'm fascinated by your insights and your role. Could I email you in a week or so and ask you a couple questions about what you think of stories versus lists? He goes, oh, that's a great topic. Yeah, send me a couple questions. I'll respond with a couple questions, stories versus lists. Then I contacted, and I didn't know them at the time, the editors of Copyblogger. And I said, hey, Copyblogger, would you be interested in publishing a short interview with an editor from the New York Times on stories versus lists? He said, yes, of course. I didn't know Copyblogger or this editor, but I'm just mixing ingredients together. And there's a format for influencer marketing that combines the influencer, the media, and you, where you are a nexus, and everyone's going to be excited about the opportunity because you were just thinking creatively. It was an immediate hit that required very little warm up. It wasn't a cold email, but I happened to meet him in person, and it was the piece ran in Copyblogger, like, let's ask an editor of the New York Times about lists versus stories. It's really interesting, and actually not that much work, because it's copying and pasting, his insights and sending them to Sonia at Copyblogger.
Yeah, no, that's a great example, really. I mean, I think there are other ways when I started one of our e-learning companies, it was in the days when content marketing probably wasn't called content marketing. We were just sort of publishing content. We read a great book called Love is the Killer App. I don't know if you know this book, which basically just says give away all your knowledge. So we were just trying to give away knowledge, but nowadays I think you'd call it content marketing, but we were just trying to give stuff away so that people, came to our website to read about good stuff, really, rather than just a brochure site. But we just did interviews every month with an expert in the field. But we started with quite junior experts in the field, less well known. But because we had a whole interview series, gradually, and I don't think it worked necessarily so much in marketing, but if you're in another space, most people said yes to us. And so we did a little audio interview, which we then also wrote up and did a transcript of. And we were the only people really doing audio interviews in that space. And I'm a great believer in podcasts, because I don't know about you, but I listen to them when I'm walking, when I'm on a train, or when I'm driving. I think podcasts are fantastic, really. So we just did one. If you're in e-learning, every week there's just an expert talking about some of the challenges they face, and not that different to what Jay Bear started with the Social Pros podcast, really. But it was just in a little niche. It wasn't a big space, but that became quite popular, and we built a reputation again because we were building relationships with lots of the experts. So we just ran an expert series, just say just one a week or so. We just ran through them. So there are lots of ways you can do that, I think. But I say don't necessarily go for those big influencers. There are smaller people who are experts in their field, but also think about your clients. I mean, if you have a good client stories can be fantastic, and they can be great advocates for you. So, even a client, so if you've got a client who's, let's say in our case, who's a head of content marketing, for example, for an agency or something, we can interview them as a client and use that as a case study on a story. So on our website, our client stories do really well, actually. People are interested in real case studies. I mean, I think you have to write them not as sales pieces. I think you have to write them as sort of warts and all stories about, these are the problems, these are the issues. I think people like authenticity and real stuff, not the problem when a marketer writes the case study, it just becomes this, everything is fantastic. And it's got to be real in some ways. I think there is something about authenticity of case studies, but you can use clients as well. A client, and the client can do a webinar with you. And that's an influencer effectively. So there are lots of different ways you can think about influencers.
Yeah, I love that. That's a good point, and I think it's often missed, is just thinking more broadly about who you're interacting with and what are they an expert on, or what stories do they know, or how could they contribute. Like everybody has very useful insights in their brains, and the job of a content marketer is to get those insights out of their brain and onto the internet. The job of the influencer marketer is to combine insights and audience in a way that amplifies, like you said, amplifies that message. I wanted to, going back to your previous enterprises, you produced an interview series that you were later able to repurpose. I'd like to hear about how you repurpose collaborative content, or how that format worked.
Yeah, it's such hard work to get collaborative content. You want to make sure you really maximize it, really. So it varies. I mean, in those cases, we were doing audio interviews that we repurpose as blog posts, for example. But when we do webinars, so when we did our initial webinars with some large influencers, some small influencers, we made sure that we turned each one into a blog post. So it was a webinar, but we obviously recorded it, and it went on YouTube, so that gave us a YouTube video as well. We just topped and tailed it, so we had a YouTube video. We don't get masses of traffic through YouTube, but it was helpful. We repurposed it as a blog post in terms of expertise. So we did one with Mari Smith, and then we turned it into Mari Smith's top 50 tips on Facebook or something like that. That did incredibly well, and that came from the webinar, for example. We also put the slides on SlideShare, so we tried to repurpose and reuse that content. Not just do one webinar and forget about it, but we tried to make the most of that content, really. And we then did what we did with our e-learning ones, which is, like I said, was old ago. We asked everyone the same questions. At the end, we asked a series of the same questions. And then we turned it into a little interactive piece. So we were interested in interactive content where you could ask we asked the question, and we said, who do you want to hear from? And we had 7 or 8 experts underneath, and you could click and hear what each of them said. So you could choose who you wanted to hear the reply from. So we just repurposed the content like that, and that went down really well. We interviewed some really big people on leadership. We were doing some leadership training, and we got some really good people who gave us their time, did audio interviews just online and on Skype, etc. So we'd say, okay, this is a leadership question. How do you motivate employees, whatever it happened to be? And then you could actually click some of these top names and get their content. So it worked as a whole interview, but it was also recut up and used in other types of content, really. So, and then you have to think about structuring your interview so you use the same questions. But I think you do need to repurpose content because it's hard work creating content. So you need to find a way of repurposing that, or you do a Facebook Live on it, etc.
I think that that idea of asking a bunch of people the same question is interesting because it might, in the end, yield a statistic. We've all seen roundups just go overboard on the number of contributors.
Yeah.
135, marketers, share their top tip, blah blah blah. If you have a big data set, you're pretty close to being able to say, 8 out of 10 marketers. There's ways to repurpose content sometimes and produce quantitative from qualitative. We're getting this question a lot, so let's ask. How do you find influencers in narrow niches?
Yeah, and I think it's hard work. I mean, we use a number of tactics to do that. I mean, firstly, I would say, talk to your customers, for example. So if you want to know who do your customers, what do they do? So I would just talk to them. And people don't do this enough. It's just talk to your customers in terms of, ask them, so what sort of sites do you read? Do you listen to podcasts, etc., the YouTube channels, etc.? So firstly, I'd ask them, or get your sales teams or teams to people who engage with your customers to ask them to try to understand what they do. Obviously, you can use different tools, Buzzsumo and other tools, to try and find influencers in set spaces. But often I think it's more intuitive. It's about, say, talking to people in that space. And that's the way I still find out about good podcasts. I mean, I can search podcasts and things, but often it's you telling me. I'm in a bar or somebody says, if you listen to this podcast, it's great. So I think you have to engage with people in that space, really. So ask people in the space. And so that's what I try to do, just build a landscape of, and I do have a little spreadsheet that I spread in terms of what websites do they read, for example, what podcasts, what YouTube videos, what experts do they like, for example, what networks do they engage on. So I do have a little sort of checklist of things that I'm trying to put together when I'm trying to map out a landscape. But it can be difficult in very small niches. On the other hand, there probably aren't that many podcasts in that particular niche, for example, to have a look at, see how well they're listened to. So, but a lot of it, I think, is just about talking to people and trying to understand. You can use the tools as well, and the tools give you a good top slicing. And and I know Rand's new tool is going to try and do more of that and find podcasts, etc. But often I find it's just talking to people in that particular industry, particularly people who are well known in the industry, to understand how do they keep up to date. So the problem at the moment is the world moves so fast. There are what, 6-7 million blog posts published today. You can double something on those orders. We cannot keep up with the amount of content. So the question I often ask people is, how do you keep up? So how do you stay on top of your industry? So is it an industry journal? Do you follow certain people? Do you have a Twitter list, etc.? But the question I'm often asking is just how do you stay on top of this stuff? There's so much, and that gives me then insights as to how they're staying on top of their particular space, really. So I would talk to people inside the niche and try to understand that. Including looking at the journalists and all those sorts of things that are there, or look at the analysts in the space as well. So no easy way. I think there's quite a lot of legwork. I'd love to say you could just put it into Buzzsumo, fly fishing, and find everyone. You'll find certain things. You'll find certain influencers on experts on fly fishing or whatever you're interested in. But actually, I think you need to do a wider piece of research, and you use Google and you use everything that you can, really. And it's just, but I think actually after 2 or 3 hours, I
thought fly fishing was the name of a tactic that I didn't know about.
I've just made that. It's a good tactic.
You've got a new way to find influencers. It's called fly fishing.
I did some work
for influencers.
I did some work on fly fishing, and actually YouTube channels where that's how it came up. Someone was saying, "What about fly fishing?" So I said, "Okay, I'll take this challenge, and I'll find a Netflix interest on fly fishing." And actually, people really like how people cast and catch fish, and they like watching people catch fish. So it was interesting. Video was a really strong form of content that the people who were doing fly fishing watched. Finding the YouTube influencers. YouTube is really still very powerful. It's particularly, I don't know if you saw the research that came out from Pew Research. If you guys don't go to Pew Research, often do go. They've got new social media stats published last week, and they show for teenagers and the top networks. The top network for teenagers was YouTube. I think it was then Snapchat and then Facebook. Wow. Facebook was going down quite a bit. And so sometimes people forget YouTube, but for teenagers, it was the most used network. They said, "What do you use most?" And it was YouTube. So that was sort of interesting, really. So I find that research really interesting. So and understand what types of audiences, because again, I think the other thing is, again, think about your audience. Which networks do your audience hang out on? Are they on Snapchat? Are they on YouTube? Are they on Reddit? I mean, I hadn't really thought much about Reddit, and then we got acquired by a company called Brandwatch, and they were getting like 15,000 engagements per post on Reddit. I think, how do they do this? And it's because they were picking trending stories, which is the nature of their business, etc. But I then had a look. Reddit is, it's 65% men under 30, for example. I mean, quite a young male audience, typically, and not exclusively. Pinterest, 93% of pins, according to Pew Research, are made by women. So quite a different audience again, for example. So Instagram, younger women, etc. So again, where are the influencers active? And some influencers are across all networks, but some people have a YouTube channel that's really good. Some people are just really good on Instagram, etc. So again, where do your audience hang out, really? And you can probably gauge some of that if you share your posts across different networks. You'll see where you get more engagement. But it isn't always just do the same across all networks. I think you have to work Facebook or you work Instagram, or I still don't understand Snapchat. My daughter's taught me how to use it, but I'm still struggling with Snapchat. But you have to really work the different networks. I think we miss YouTube. We think we do a lot more on YouTube personally.
Yeah, I'm getting more active there. I think regardless of the source, whether it's talking to people or whether you're using Steve's famous fly fishing tactic to find influencers, that's not a thing. But Buzzsumo, or just watching or listening or looking at roundups, we should be building lists, though. I think content marketers are not writing lists for publishing, but managing a list and having a spreadsheet of people that you believe to be influential over your audience. That list of potential collaborators should be one of those lists that you have.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we built a list. We built a list of 20 people. When we started, I sat down with James and Henley, and we said, right, who do we want? Because we haven't got money for advertising. We never spent anything on advertising. We've now got 500,000 users on the site, but we never spent anything on advertising. We now boost the odd post, but you'll never see us sponsoring a conference as such. And And we just built a list of 20, and we tried to build relationships with those 20. And I'd say 10 of those, we've become friends with 10 of those, not all of them, but you can't build relationships with too many people at the same time. That's why I don't like the spread email lists. We really focused heavily on trying to build relationships with those particular influencers. So I set up a Buzzsumo alert. Every time they publish content, I get an alert. So, and then I just I share that. I share that every morning. First thing I do every morning is I check my list of influencers. Have they published new content? And then I'll share the content, etc.
Perfect.
And so that keeps me in their mind because I mention them, etc. And they may not see me, but I'm just trying to be helpful. As soon as they publish content, I want to help their content get some traction. I have not a big Twitter following, but I can push it out on my networks, etc. Just trying to help them. So yeah, my 10 influencers, when they publish content, I would be trying to share their content, trying to be helpful all the time, really. And if you have a list of 100, that gets really hard. I think you can only build relationships with so many people in one go. It can be more than 10 or so, but for us, that works really well. And what we can prove almost conclusively at Buzzsumo, we looked at influencers. We defined influencers as somebody had a retweet rate of more than 2, which might sound really low. That means on average, every time they tweet, they get an average of 2. But some people have 6, 10 and more. And what we found is if one influencer shared it, they got slightly more shares, I think 30% more shares overall. 2 people, they got more shares, etc. But once they got to 5 influencers sharing it, it went like a little exponential curve. And so we set ourselves a target of getting 5 of our key influencers to share each piece of content. Because I don't know whether it's just because everybody sees they follow the same people. They say, Andy shared it and Jay shared it and Mark Schaefer shared it or whatever. And then it gets a bit more, I don't know. But we found that once you got to 5, it really took off. It went up sort of in a linear fashion up to about 5. And after 5, it seemed to take off. So that was our challenge for every piece of content is, okay, let's make sure we get 5 people who are really sharing and pushing this, as well as obviously you have to promote your own content. You have to mail your own lists, etc. And I don't think people do enough on promoting content. I think that's a general thing. Influencers are one way to help amplify your content. But yeah, I'm a great believer. You should spend as much time promoting your content as you do writing it. So not write it, hit publish and forget about it. Well,
this is awesome. We're coming up at the top of the hour. I'm going to do my best to summarize. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here. We're still live here on the Semrush chat. This is, so what we're discussing today is a tactic within influencer marketing about collaborative content. I'm here with Steve Rayson of Buzzsumo, and what we've discussed is not necessarily going for mega celebrities, looking for micro-influencers who are relevant in your niche, building those relationships slowly over time, and focusing on a narrow number. We're going to listen to our audience to find out where, who they're listening to themselves, build a small list of them, 10, 20, 25, and then start paying careful attention to those people. They publish something, we're going to share it. They wrote about something, we're going to comment on it. So that we gradually build up that reciprocity and gratitude and friendship with these people. And then when the time is right, we're going to just in a super collaborative way offer to include their voice on something we're creating, collaborative content, contributor quote, collaboration on research, whatever it might be. And to use that as a way to increase the amount of social shares and visibility for that among that influencer, and then to gradually nurture and develop that relationship over time because we love them and we care about them and we know who they are and we're becoming friends with them. Our goal is really to go beyond just a cutthroat business of increasing virality or shares or getting links. We are giving before we get. We're finding value for everyone, exposure value and quality content, and working together with other people in a way to give a benefit to them, a benefit to the audience, a benefit, of course, to our brand as well. That has been our philosophy and the focus of this conversation, which is collaborative content with influencers in ways that amplify messaging and create a win for everyone involved.
Great.
So this has been great. Steve, any last words?
No, it's a fantastic summary. So it's hard. We sort of wandered around a bit, but I hope it's a good summary. But hopefully there's some key takeaways for people there. And generally, as we say, I'm keen to help. If people do have questions, they can just tweet me and I'll try to reply to them, etc. I'm just at Steve Rayson. So I've generally just tried to reply to any questions if people have them.
And Steve said it earlier, people in this industry are very kind and generous. I do my best to be that way myself. Anyone on this webinar that's interested, of course, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or anywhere. And I'm open to, and all of us, if we can help anyone in any way, answer questions or help anyone with anything that they're working on, of course. And just to plug tomorrow, same time, almost roughly the same time, take a look at the Semrush webinar page, but there's a really focused conversation tomorrow. I'm part of a panel with Aidan and Gareth and Ian about growing authority over 90 days. It's a 90-day challenge for building up the authority of any website. So I hope that some of you can join us then. This has been a big pleasure. I want to thank you, Steve. This was great for sharing all those insights, your research, your experience. I hope that everyone here learned as much as I did.
Great. Thank you very much for having me on. I really enjoyed it. So I shall see you soon in Chicago.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, everyone.